So here we go. So my name is Bilal Lodhia. I am currently with Dubai Taxi as an IoT specialist. However, prior to this, I had worked with BIA Group and Gargash Group as a cybersecurity manager. I'm a very ground up kind of a person. So very grassroots, very techie. Started as an L1, joined infra, you know. So it's a very interesting kind of a journey I've got, but um, I am a very I'm very keen on technology. I love technology. That's one of the reasons I got into the IoT side of things. Is I wanted to I love playing with Raspberry Pis and Arduinos and um, Atney 85, I think it was, that I used for making Rubber Ducky with MicroPython. Very interesting stuff, connecting GPIO headers, using low power systems to accomplish weird things like turning servo motors or uh, I mean, any number of things, right? You connect it, you use it, and you go, right? So it's a very interesting case for things like edge and whatnot. But I love tech, is the point. Sorry, I love tech. Um, I'm a home labber because I love to just when I'm bored, I like to just get something new, something running. Last thing I played with was an IDP, an identity provider. So basically, in enterprise language, that we call an SSO, right? So we have an SSO solution from literally every vendor in the world. Okay, I found an SSO solution. Okay, that's what I can use. Okay, this is SAML, OIDC, et cetera, LDAP, right? Okay, proxying. So that was, very recent memory, but among other things, right? MDM, Active Directory in open source, file servers, tail scale, head scale, um, just whatever. If I can find something interesting, I'll play around with it. Um, and if I can modify it, very much I'll modify it. Um, I am that one customer you should not meet just by yourself, unless we're friendly already, we know each other already, we just want to have a catch up. Usually, whenever I get a cold call and I find it interesting, I want to meet that person, that sales guy. I'll always say that, hey, why don't you bring your pre-sales with you? Your pre-sales engineer. And one person has suffered by not following that recommendation because he was like, yeah, I should have brought my PSE with me. Cool. Well, I'm booked for the next month, so if you can wait a month. So because I like to get into the nitty-gritty questions, which falls into my next point, which is I like asking a lot of basic questions. I know it sounds very silly, especially in cyber, which looks so complex and so huge and convoluted, but really it's just based on a lot of basic building blocks. As an example, base 64 is seen as the constant, the common method of obfuscation for delivering a payload. So if you have a corporate firewall, it'll see the traffic coming in as base 64. I tried the same idea with exfiltrating data, and world leading DLP providers said, yeah, we totally do that. No, they didn't. They were not able to block it. So it's I like those basic questions which wind up uh, making people scratch their head. So that's kind of who I am. There's other things which aren't really relevant. I love anime. I love a wide variety of music, but I don't think that's really relevant here. Um, Again, guys, anytime, any questions or any concerns or comments, right? Just anytime, just give me a shout. I want to be talking about a few things here. One of them is marketing, marketing, marketing. And too much of the time, it just succeeds, right? I've seen too many CISOs, CIOs, CTOs. They'll just buy it and they'll just eat it up and they will not ask the pertinent questions, which at a low level, at an engineering level, they don't need to go that far. It's not their job. I respect that. But then again, they won't have the guiding questions ready either, right? And that's not to say that it's a matter of incompetence. It's a matter of the hype gets so real, we just forget all about it, right? And if you've been following the crypto space, you'll know what I'm talking about. People get rug pulled all the time, and they still keep putting their money in. So hype is a real thing, But just want to talk about that a bit and some things to look out for. Um, I just mentioned the term obfuscation earlier. I'm using it here on purpose, but mechanisms that get obfuscated is a double-edged sword. Um, I've had too many times where someone will say, we've got a fantastic solution. And I'll say, well, okay, well, how does that work? And that's because I need to figure out who I need to put on the job to get the thing delivered, right? Will I need one engineer working on it? Will I need two engineers? Do I have to worry about shifts? Maybe someone is going on leave. Do I need any additional training? Do I need to worry about dependencies? So let's say I got two engineers and I need something which requires a certain skill set. I'll use Linux as an easy example, and only one engineer gets it. Well, maybe I don't want to go for that option then, right? Just as it's a very silly example, but the point remains the same, right? When mechanisms become too obfuscated, then that starts throwing alarm bells for me. Another common thing I've seen in the UAE specifically, but also in the Gulf, I've heard stories from other customers and salespeople is, Sarji, he wanted on-prem and he did not get on-prem. So, you always want to be careful about that, right? Sometimes it's because of compliance reasons. Sometimes it's because of budget. Sometimes it's because of that appetite's not there. So, and again, not everything needs to be overcomplicated, right? Stakeholders are always an interesting bit because you think you're talking to someone who can help you when it turns out that person had no power whatsoever. Or maybe you didn't even think to talk about it. I have a dear friend, he's like a brother, and he has a startup, and he's recently expanded to the UAE, and he's faced this exact challenge. So, you want to make sure you find the right stakeholder. And I say roulette because, you find someone, you try to escalate, further, and then next thing you know, you're out of ammo, And then finally, some red flags and pitfalls, in my opinion, that you should be wary of. It doesn't mean that it's immediate dismissal. It doesn't mean that, you should be necessarily, how do I put it, write it off as a loss, or, or you should blacklist them, or, they will blacklist. No, it's nothing like that necessarily. It's just be very careful walking into this. So I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of having been a customer. I'm still a customer on the customer side, having talked with vendors. So going back to the talking points, right? Buzzwords sell and substance sustains. And one of the strong points that I always see whenever a call is made to me is, we have this fantastic thing. This is going to be revolutionary. This is in the Gartner MQ, et cetera, which is great. It's a great starting point. But conversations typically fall apart very quickly because, well, aside from the pre-sales guy not being there, the salesperson is also stuck because they don't know what my roadmap looks like, which that's fair. That's fine. That's why we have these introductory calls. We get together. But then we have to extract the substance out of that conversation, right? And that's kind of what needs to be looked at. The kind of warning bells for me fire off when I don't have a conversation with substance. And this has to do not just with your sales pitch, but also with reading the room and understanding what is being asked. And 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 sales pitches will fall flat on this for me personally, where there's a lot of marketing buzzwords, but I don't really see exactly how you're going to solve my problem, right? You're going to say that this is leading edge, et cetera, but you're not really helping me explain how this fits into my program, for example. I'll give you an example. As a customer, I like to take a framework first approach. And no, I don't mean ISO. I mean something like NIST, or my personal favorite, CIS. That, okay, well, how can I fit this into my framework? That I've got this missing, for example. So a good substantial relationship requires that there's the substance be there. And if that's going to be there, then, renewals are generally easier unless you've got someone coming in and undercutting you, your competition coming in, undercutting you drastically, either in terms of price or in terms of significant features. But that's a different thing altogether, right? Product lifecycle development. But this is usually what is most worrisome for me whenever I'm having a first meeting with someone. I've had too many calls from one guy, which I didn't mind because he was following up. I asked him to call me. He'll call me 6 times, 7 times in 2 months, for example, and that's fine. Because I asked him to. But then I'll have some people call me, like 10 times a week, and that's very obvious, right? That's a very obvious way to perceive that statement that I've just put up, right? You need to know when not to push. Another interpretation of this is, you've got the conversation going, you're showing your presentation, your slide deck, let the engineer do the selling for you, right? If I'm a technical customer, I'm asking for a technical output. You don't need to insert yourself every time to assure me, right? That's the function of your pre-sales engineer if I'm asking for that, right? Conversely, if I'm asking for strategic input and you've got your managing director with you or a partner with you or a founder with you, then they can kind of give that also, right? You don't have to insert yourself at every way. It kind of breaks that flow. So these are more soft skills things, but I've had cases where those flows are broken, and it makes me want to actually avoid that guy who could become my account manager and just go directly to the engineer, which I don't think is very pleasant. And it also causes issues for the owner of the company going like, hey, I need my engineer, and he's being engaged by the customer directly. What's the account manager doing? So this is something that I feel has always kind of been a pain of sort. Another one is social events which are done. You could be participating as a bronze sponsor or a silver sponsor, or maybe you're visiting itself as a customer, like a customer of the event, right? You're not one of the sponsors. You are a vendor, but you're there. And one of the common things I've seen is that there's going to be roundtables, there's going to be panels, but there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of word salad, right? I've had maybe 2 or 3 meaningful sessions in these 5 years that I've been in the UAE where I was like, I walked away with something good. I walked away with something different or meaningful. So this is something which I think it's an opportunity point, is how I'm trying to say it, right? If this could be improved, if you could arrange a roundtable or a panel, or if you could do a customer's gala dinner, and you have talking points which are meaningful, it's a very hard ask, I know, but if you could achieve that somehow, then that would be something of true value, which I feel is missing in the market overall. Like I said, I've only had 2 or 3 meaningful such platforms, or sessions rather. And then my personal favorite to end on is, for me, Gartner is the philosopher's stone. I know some people, they swear by it, right? They will just say, oh my God, it's amazing. I know one guy besides myself who calls it BS because of how they feel about it, right? Which I'll go into next. It's a very special kind of a thing, Gartner, right? Especially if you're a young company, right, a couple of years old, you have kind of penetrated, or maybe you're still in the penetration phase, right? So a CISO needs your product trademark to be in the Magic Quadrant. Why? Well, he got to make his CEO happy, right? However, your product could be in a non-existent category. I'll give you an example. In one of my jobs, my top boss worked with an NDR. And that NDR was in a non-existent category. There was no Gartner Magic Quadrant for network detection and response. The closest you would have is something like an IDS or an IPS, but this was not that, right? Maybe a TAP from a network architecture perspective, but not that either. Okay, well, that means you don't have enough customers, so you can't join the Magic Quadrant party, right? Well, go to line 10. I mean, that's a QBasic reference if you get it. But the whole point is that you're kind of stuck in a loop, I got to do this to do that, but I kind of can. And you're stuck with the ultimate chicken or egg that, how do I do this? And you need someone to buy your vision. You need someone to really believe in what you've got to kind of take that first crack at your product seriously. Because as any salesperson will tell you, a good sales guy definitely helps, but what really sells is a very, very happy customer. So that's what you really need. In this case, I had that one group CIO who cracked that NDR. He loved it, and he sold that NDR more for that company than their own salespeople, right? He was on all the big calls. He was saying that this is what we've done, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be the hardest thing to crack. But once you've got it, then, good sales invite more sales. What about obfuscation? That is base64 obfuscated for obfuscation. My hot take is too much marketing is equal to obfuscation. Now, this is, again, it's a very sensitive hot take for some people, I'm aware. But the whole idea is, and I've got a use case for this afterwards. If you can't give me your product without a significant amount of word salad, I'm kind of worried, right? That's not to say that all marketing or obfuscation is bad. And I don't mind using the name for this one, right? Okta is a good example for this, right? Where Okta will be like, well, I see all the marketing fluff, but does it actually work? Well, yeah, it does, because there's a lot of successful implementations out there. It's just very well marketed, which that's perfectly fine, you know? It makes it harder for people like me to get into it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It's there, but it's very good on the technical and it's very good on the marketing, and that's perfectly fine. Some customers don't ask too much, and that's fine, right? The right level of obfuscation or the obtuseness or the marketing, the cloak, it's perfectly fine as long as you have something to back it up. But the corollary to this point is other customers care enough to know, which I'm one of those people. And when that happens, when that comes, right, be ready to able to present your marketing material in such a way that it's concise, it's to the point, it's accurate, and it's readily understandable and relatable, which isn't always easy. Because many salespeople are pure sales. They're not technical in nature. Some of them are, but most of the time they're not. And that makes it difficult. That's where I feel what sets a good pre-sales guy apart from a great pre-sales engineer is the ability to have that discussion, right? I'll give you an example. Zero trust networking. Not one company has given me a concrete example of what that means. That doesn't mean there's no definition for it, right? NIST has clearly defined it. I believe, was it CIA or the NSA? I think it was the NSA has a clear definition for it also in terms of the frameworks and the principles. This is a principle, right? Zero trust networking is not a solution, it's a principle. The solution you bring addresses those principles, right? Like all products, PAM, IDS, IPS, these are not products, these are principles which your products or your solutions address, right? I mean, the things I've heard throughout these past few years, right? I mean, it's not a VPN, it's an overlay network. How's that not a VPN, right? Or we do microsegmentation. That's our zero trust networking. Sorry, a question?
Bilal, can I ask you a question, please?
Of course.
What I understand from what you're saying here, not this one, the previous slide, sorry, because I raised my hand, but you couldn't see it.
Yep.
Is that so too much marketing sometimes hide that the product is not good? Is that correct?
That's not my statement. No, my statement
Okay,
is that. So my hot take, right? What sets me off is if I see too much marketing, I'm worried that there's obfuscation going on. That it's not that the product is necessarily bad, but I have to do more diligence.
Oh, okay. That's clear.
Right?
So, okay, perfect. So, but sometimes is it needed to have more marketing to, let's say, cover? Well, no product is perfect. So you need sometimes to improve a little bit the image of your product, and it's not something bad
Yep.
to do.
So let me give you a non-marketing example, and that's why I've kept this as a separate category instead of under marketing, right? I've had technical discussions on an architecture of. I'll give you an example. Let's say DLP, right? DLP is an easy example of this, right? And if I ask, well, okay, well, how does your DLP work? The answer shouldn't be, oh, it sees all of your data in your entire environment, and that and it will detect it, it'll classify it, it'll protect the data for you. That should be on your marketing slide. That should not be the answer to my question to which you've already said that. Your answer should then be, we collect data from structured sources, unstructured sources. We monitor things on the network. We install an agent. We have plugins for your various SaaS solutions that monitors the flow of your data with the various classifications. And that's how we lock it down. That to me is a more meaningful response versus the marketing that I've already heard. There's nothing wrong with marketing. That's the hook. You need that hook to get me in. But if I've asked you, well, how does it work? And you repeat the marketing hook again, I will typically follow up and say, okay, how does that work technically? And if you're still saying, oh yeah, it's secret sauce, then now you're trying to not answer my question. So this is kind of where it comes down to that, okay, are you doing this intentionally because your product isn't good? Are you doing it because you don't understand my question? I don't think it's the first, although there have been cases. More often than not, it's the second. And usually it's because they can't answer it because they're sales. And that's fine. But that's where the pre-sales engineer should take over. Many pre-sales engineers in these calls are generally techie people. English is not their strongest point, and they're sitting there. They understand the product very well, but they cannot explain it. I've lost count of how many times the engineer was supposed to answer this question. He was invoked by the sales guy, by the director, and still he was not able to properly explain what exactly the function is and how it works, right? So these are things that are improvement points that, I mean, I've had the opposite also. I've had cases where that was answered perfectly well. You know, I was on a call with an asset correlation platform, and they were able to address my points perfectly well. You know, so these are the things that I'm kind of pointing out, that the marketing is great. It has a use. I'm not looking down on it at all, right? It has its function, but you can't answer a question with marketing repeatedly, especially if it starts becoming a technical discussion. Security is not the product of marketing. Security is the outcome of technology and strategy. So when a security question comes along, it's going to be strategic or technical in nature, or compliance, right? Things like, well, okay, will you give me, for example, an insurance quantity, for example, right? CrowdStrike gives an insurance guarantee of X amount of dollars, for example. Or, you know, a backup solution provider will say, we give you this much guarantee in terms of your deliverables, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the questions that need to be answered and addressed. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with obfuscation, right? What you're saying, definitely, that there's part of that if the marketing from the get-go is too strong, that also does kind of worry me. But that's much more relaxing and much more forgiving, right? Because, I mean, that's the job of marketing, to sell, right? I'm going to dissect this when I get down with you in a call. That's when I'll start dissecting it.
Thank you. Thank you. Very clear.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. Please, if you have any other questions, guys, anytime. So like I was mentioning for zero trust networking, right? People will say it's not a VPN. Well, yeah, it's an overlay network, right? Yes, that's literally what a VPN is. A VPN is a network overlay, which does network routing in an encapsulated tunnel, which is encrypted in nature, over a WAN. That's what a VPN is supposed to do. No, but it's not SSL. I never said it was SSL. It can be OpenVPN. It can be WireGuard. It can be SOCKS 5 proxies for all I care over SSH. It doesn't matter. It's tunneling is the point, right? You can't say it's not VPN and then proceed to describe a VPN, right? So this is one example of obfuscation gone wrong for VPN zero trust solutions. Another one was, we do microsegmentation, right? But they do nothing on the actual network, right? They don't sit on my switch. They don't sit on my switch stack. They don't sit on my firewall stack. It's not a radius control. It's nothing. What does it do? Literally, I've had one product guy say, oh yeah, we control Windows firewall policies. Yeah, Habibi, I don't need you for that. I can do that through Intune. I can do that through GPOs. I can do that through scripts. I don't need a separate product just for controlling firewall policies on Windows, you know? And then the other people, right? What's zero trust? Zero trust means don't trust anything. Well, should I cut the call then? You know, because I shouldn't trust you. No, you should trust us. Well, I mean, you didn't think this through, did you? So it's a very simple language test, and it's a very simple. So you can see cases of it already exists. You're trying to differentiate yourself superficially, or this exists. You made a product which you didn't think thoroughly through that already exists, and you made a product literally for nothing. You'll still make sales, but you will not have a champion who will say, this is actually totally different, right? And then the last one is literally, it's just silly. It's just, you know, English fail, terribly bad English fail, right? Don't trust anything. Well, goodbye, you know? So these are cases of obfuscation with zero trust that I've just said, come on, man, it can't be that hard. But it is that hard because you can't make every concept a product. It's impossible. Zero trust is a concept. Zero trust requires identity to be in order. Do you have your IDAM in order? No. You've lost half the battle of zero trust networking. You have to have your applications, well, that's part of IDAM, let's say that. You have to have a strong network architecture, right? In terms of things like 2FA and SSO and integrations. Do you have all of that? Well, no. Well, okay, again, you've lost half the battle, right? So that's the concept, right? And you can do zero trust networking with OpenVPN just fine, as long as the workflows are there. And if you don't, then, you know, the point is lost. And I remember I was at a CISO roundtable from IDC. It was an IDC sponsored event, and I sat there And the wonderful lady started the day literally saying, "Can we admit the hype is over?" And yeah, I just wanted to scream, you know. I just lost it there. I was like, "Are you serious? This is how you start this conversation?" You know, you're literally admitting it was hype, you know. So this is a good example of obfuscation, where zero trust networking is a real concept. It has real tenets. It has real things to follow, but everyone who keeps pushing it obfuscates what they're actually doing, when in reality they should just say we're a next-gen VPN. And that's fine. It works for firewalls, right? We're a next-gen firewall. Cool, I gotta have that. We're a next-gen antivirus. Man, I gotta have that. Which now we call EDR, right? Well, that's perfectly fine. You know, you can say you're next-gen, and there's no one that's gonna disagree with it. Call it next-gen VPN. I'm fine with that, you know? So there's one example of what's been super frustrating, getting easy answers out of it. The salespeople who understand will do everything they can to not directly answer the question. I've spent maybe 10 plus minutes boiling something down to a basic, so this is what you do. I mean, not exactly, no, but this is literally what you do. Yeah, okay. Well, just say so, you know? So this is something to be careful about, right? And I realize this might sound painful for a startup that's trying to do something which is super saturated. But the whole point of a startup isn't that you're doing what everyone else is doing. The whole point of your startup should be, ideally, that you've got something which others are doing, but you do it better, or you do more, which others aren't. That's the whole idea of your startup, isn't it? Clouds, right? Cumulonimbus, I can never pronounce it correctly, which is why it's the title. See, like I said earlier, many customers don't need cloud, right? And some outright ban it. Government, military, no cloud, right? In Abu Dhabi, it's notorious. You have to use Core 42, and that's really about it. There used to be Injazat as an alternative, but you know, they just say no, hell no, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't do SaaS, right? SaaS as a technology is, yeah, fine. You know, it's literally a bunch of API called serverless Lambda functions. Maybe it's a Kubernetes cluster, right? Or Portainer, Podman, right? Which is fine. But SaaS is also a financial concept, which is that it's a billing model, right? You charge based on consumption. You can totally do that, right? And still be on-prem, or even air-gapped, right? And this is something that really, if a customer says air-gapped, they don't mean that, oh yeah, you know, all the important data is here, but metadata can go out. If they say air-gapped, they mean air-gapped. No metadata, no phone home, no call home, no license checks, nothing. And this is something important to keep in mind, that your software should be able to accommodate this, right? I mean, that could be as simple as suspending a license check function, to as simple as installing a license server on premises itself, like the way that Microsoft does it with their key management system. There's any number of ways of doing it, right? So confidential company needs on-prem, right? This is, I mean, literally any institution from the government, military, from any country in the Gulf. And the company says, yeah, totally, we can do it. And this is literally what's happened, right? And there have been multiple products that have done this. There have been multiple requesters that have asked for this, right? Company was still running a call home. Company got blacklisted, and then they're shocked. Oh my God, how did this happen? Well, Pikachu, I mean, you kind of did it to yourself, you know? If they say no cloud, they mean no cloud, you know? And again, that's not to say that every company is government that's not on cloud, right? If you believe the adoption rates that you see from reports like Forrester, Gartner, IDC, that only 14% of cloud consumption is on public cloud, right? Sorry, of all compute is on public cloud, not cloud itself, but all compute. And I think 40+% is still on-prem. You will find a lot of companies which still operate with that approach. There's nothing wrong with it, right? There's, in fact, if you follow the Western IT guys, you'll see there's this huge shift back to on-prem because cloud got out of control. So this is very much what you kind of have to keep in mind, that, okay, well, how can I work with cloud, right? Will they let me do a phone home? Will they not let me do a phone home? And if they don't, ideally, you should already have it part of your stack that, yeah, not a problem, man. We can run it in offline mode. You can put caps on it. You can put soft caps, hard caps, right? You could literally do, so I'm from Pakistan. You could literally do what the electric company in my hometown does, right? Where they got a guy, he goes to every single meter with a scratch pad. He writes down, okay, this number has this many units consumed. Okay, we're going to bill you. And then 2 days later, you get a bill and you're upset about it, but what are you going to do? Live without electricity? There's any number of ways around it. It's not fun. It's not cyber. It's not modern. But if the customer's a multi-million-dollar company, you're not going to say no. Right? This is a gun reference. I'm not a gun head whatsoever, but Kentucky Ballistics is my favorite YouTube channel for guns. And what better Russian roulette revolver to use than the Smith & Wesson Magnum 500? See, I've had this example, and this is specifically to Russian roulette. This is for stakeholders, right? We had a prospect who loved it. This is, again, from the same company, same guys that are my friends. They have their startup. And they expanded here to the UAE, and they met with a company in Abu Dhabi, a school, and they said, oh, yeah, they loved it. Cool. I didn't ask further than that, but, you know, when I started digging into it, oh, yeah, she was a teacher in a school. Notice the part that's blacked out, that's struck out. She's not a head. She's not a director. She's not a strategic stakeholder. She's a stakeholder from a consumption perspective. She will use it. She's great for beta testing, quality assurance, research groups, focus groups, but she's not great for selling your product, right? Unless she's got swing with someone very senior, she's not going to sell your product for you. That needs to be an HOD. That needs to be a director or a dean, or because this is a school, for example, right? So a dean, for example, or a board member, right? It needs to be someone strategic who has the decision-making power, who controls the budget. And this is a very common scenario, right? I've actually now in my new role been telling guys that, guys, I don't control IT. I don't control security. I don't control the budget. I can connect you to the guy, but I'm not your man for this, unfortunately, right? So you want to make sure you get in touch with the right people. And I've put this here specifically out of my friend's experience, who they started as a startup. They've got a few years now. I just want to share that, right? That I'm sure some of you guys are extremely competent, and you've worked with boards, and you've worked with these, you know, with C-suites. You know how to pitch it to them, but and that's a very valuable skill to have, right? Because maybe this teacher can get you into a meeting with the head of department or with the principal, and then you, with your C-suite experience, with your board experience, can pitch it in that way, which they say, yeah, we need that. Not just this is a cool platform or whatever. No. But you can pitch it in a way which aligns with their strategic goals. An easy example, I'll take printing services as an example, right? So people come, they say, yeah, we'll sell you managed print services. Okay, great. I want pay-per-click. Oh, yeah, definitely, because they're going to make more money off of it. They're happy with that, and I don't have to worry about tracking my equipment or whatever. Fantastic. But then I say, I also want reports. Yeah, we can give you consumption reports. Great. I want it by department. Why? Because I want to bill the departments directly. I want that cost to come out of the department's budget that have consumed that print. So if finance is printing, say 80,000 pages out of 100,000 in a month, finance should pay for 80,000 pages, right? Conversely, if Eddie in operations is printing 1,000 pages for his novel for his 5th time with color, and you know it's we need to be able to track that, right? But the other thing is, I want to be able to go back to my director or my CIO and say, hey, we're also going to do reports for ESG measures, right? Specifically environmental, trees consumed, carbon footprint in terms of energy consumption. This is important, right? Big Four are talking about ESG all the time. I don't know about the DEI part, but I don't think that was ever applicable to our region. But environmental, absolutely. So, oh, yeah, that would be fantastic. Definitely. So that's the kind of stuff that senior management would love, but a technical guy, an L1, or someone who does the printing themselves, like Eddie in operations, he's not going to know about any of this or care about any of this. So that strategic bridging is what's going to help you get your bridge gapped that much quicker, right? You can close the gap that much quicker, get to more meaningful stakeholders that much quicker. And again, read the expressions of your person that you're talking to, right? If you're talking to me and I don't have a clue what you're saying, that should be immediately for you that you either have to go further up the food chain or you have to educate me a lot. So these are some of the things to worry about when you're dealing with stakeholders, right? You don't want to be too far on the too low on the food chain, but you also don't want to be with someone who's actually close to the top but doesn't have a clue. So you're gonna have to balance that stakeholder awareness and manage the expectations accordingly. Some red flags, because literally the flags are red. If a customer tells you, right, we want you to build a strategy, this is kind of worrying. And you have to look for a couple of things. Okay, well, sir, what do you mean by build a strategy? Do you mean a deployment strategy? If the answer is yes, then that should be okay, right? You can co-author a deployment strategy or take some inputs and be like, yeah, okay, well, we've seen all your sites, we've seen your requirements, we've seen your locations, which are more sensitive, which are more busy, right? We understand your working hours. Okay, we're going to work around this. Or if you're looking at, for example, deploying a SaaS solution, we understand who your SaaS providers are in your region. Let's say you're in Bahrain, you only got GCP over there. I don't think AWS yet, but no Azure. So if you have any Azure specific functions, you're kind of SOL. You're going to have to go to, I mean, if it's just a container, it's easy, right? But if you rely on Cosmo DB, you don't have a choice. So, so when it comes to this kind of a thing, you want to be very careful, because the opposite of that, and I've been part of that on the customer side where I said this is ridiculous, is no, we want you to build our, you know what, I'm going to use Zero Trust as an example. We want you to build our Zero Trust strategy. Habibi, that's not how this works. It's you have to build your strategy, right? Because it's not just a matter of the concepts are the same across, because Zero Trust is Zero Trust. That doesn't change. But the applicability, the approach, right? The stakeholder buy-in, the required technologies that you want as per your risk appetite, when you want it, which risks you accept when, the provider, the supplier cannot do that. And if you're asking for that person to behave like one of the big four and do all of that, it's not impossible, but it's extremely, extremely problematic. One, from a conflict perspective, because, well, what's stopping the supplier from making the strategy so heavily married to their solutions that it doesn't serve the customer anymore, right? So from multiple angles, that becomes a red flag. That's just a giant no. So this is something to be careful for, because your sales guy might say, that is phenomenal, we can totally do that. But who are you going to put on it? Your MD? Your MD has more important things to do. Your MD could be stuck having to go to Prague or Berlin or Athens for some conferences or some discoveries or whatever, and he's being double booked right now for building a strategy. That's not cool, right? So this is something to be very careful of. If you have a customer that says, we want you to build our strategy, he better mean deployment strategy and nothing else, or something like that, which is manageable, specific to your scope of work. We want this in half the cost. Again, it really depends on the context. And I'll give you an easy example, right? Cisco, biggest name. Juniper, biggest name, right? Biggest cost for switches, firewalls, access points, routers. God, the routers. If you're selling, I don't know, let's say that you're selling Ubiquiti, or you're selling Huawei, or you're selling ZTE, or you're selling Ingenious, right? These are not as prestigious brands, and you probably could do it in half the cost, unless it's Huawei, in which case you'll probably do it in like 1/3 the cost. Then yeah, that makes sense. Like, look, I'm spending $2 million a year on my Cisco stuff. I want to half my cost. Can you help me? Oh yeah, absolutely, I can help you. What's not cool is when you say that, yeah, we're gonna do this, and it'll cost you 600,000, and your customer comes and says, no, I want it for half. Well, okay, I want a unicorn, doesn't mean it's gonna happen, right? So know your worth. I mean, some things you want to sell in a loss, strategically speaking, because that will get you more customers. But you have to pick and choose those battles, and you can't you can't choose a loss so huge that you wind up burning your runway from 18 months down to 6 months because you needed that customer, but it turns out after that customer, no one else really came. That's not a gamble worth having necessarily. Again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you have to kind of weigh the options, right? And that's your call to make. Again, it's your business, it's your baby. How much fire do you want your baby to be around? I mean, as a parent, you should get a good idea for that. The CISO doesn't have this on the roadmap is one of the most common things that I've used as an excuse to tell people to please leave me alone. But at the same time, so let me put it this way: if I was selling something, right, and if someone told me this can be good or bad. This can be bad. Let's start with the bad. Obviously, not being on the roadmap means it's not in the budget. Done automatically, right? How much I know you will depend whether or not I tell you it's not in the budget, versus if you're a fresh face, I'll just say, no, it's not on the roadmap just yet. Well, that could mean it's probably 2 years out, not even 1 year. On the other hand, if it's not on the roadmap, it could be because you have something so disruptive. It probably won't be on his roadmap because even Gartner doesn't know about it. Well, what you gonna do, right? So this is again coming back to this stakeholder management part, where you have to educate, you have to get them to that point. And if they can get either an extraordinary budget approval, or if they can reallocate budgets from other line items, then definitely doable, right? If you guys are aware of the budgets, I'm more than happy to talk about the 2 popular budget types. So far, every company I've been in, and I've been in 3 in the UAE, has been line item budgets. And I'm happy to go over it if if it helps you to further understand that. But this is something that, depending on the budgeting schematic that they use, this can be anywhere from kind of doable to very doable, or in the opposite direction, they're just not interested, or they don't want to do it, or they don't understand the need to do it, even if it's necessary, right? So you'll have all kinds of customers. So I just joined the company a few months ago. This is literally me right now. This can be a couple of things. This can be, on the best case scenario, yeah, he just joined. He's looking to make an impact. Do your diligence, right? If you've heard this guy, this person is a great person, he commits to the vendors, to the suppliers, to his partners, and he does the work. He doesn't chicken out. He doesn't leave them hanging. And there's trust for this person in the market, and you know who your peers are, your channel partners, your distributors, sales partners who have worked with these guys, marketing agencies who have worked with these guys. If a CISO comes up to you and says, I just joined a few months ago, but he's got reputation that he's not going to let you down, that's okay. But maybe that's not always going to be there, right? And failures aren't always exactly advertised for obvious reasons. So the other thing could be, well, is it because people are leaving regularly, right? The immediate thing you should do is go and look for that position. Well, who was the last person in that position, and how long were they there for? And if you see a pattern of, man, CISOs are here for a year and a half, 6 months, 8 months, and no one's been here for a good 5 years or 3 years at least, like consistently, you might want to be careful, because if you have a long deployment plan like a DLP or an IDAM, your project, your revenue could be at risk, at very real risk. So what you don't want is that you start this process, everything, and then, this CISO leaves, the new guy joins, and he just tears everything up. Oh, there's a contract, there's this, there's that. Well, you know what? You're right. There's a contract, but you're a small startup. You don't have the capital. You can sue us over it, and we'll take you to court, and you'll waste all your money over there, because that's cheaper for me. So be very careful of choosing these things, right? I'm not saying people have done this. I'm not saying they haven't done this. I'm just speaking in the realm of possibilities. And it has happened. Of course it's happened. Third-party vendors saying, yeah, they don't pay on time. I've been waiting for 6 months. The audacity of this is that it's happened to me in a couple of companies throughout my career, where people have come to me and said, yeah, sure, but we'll require you to pay up front 100%. That's not your standard terms. Why? Well, we've heard that your company doesn't pay on time. Sometimes people wait 6 months, 8 months. We've heard of one company waiting for over a year. Damn, that is embarrassing. As a customer, that is extremely, supremely embarrassing. But at the same time, this is something that you should be looking for any which ways, that, hey, I'm about to do a deal with company XYZ. How are they on payments? Yeah, they're okay. They're not bad. And all it takes is one person to say, well, they really did a number on me. Well, why? Well, and if they're honest and they tell you, look, it was, the sales pitch was too obfuscated for them, right? They thought we're selling them the world, which, I mean, we did market it that way. But when it came time to deliver, they started changing everything. Scope creep came out of the Yahoo, and next thing you know, we're not agreeing on anything, right? So that's another point for the obfuscation thing, is that you want to be careful, because if you sell the world, you have to deliver the world. So that's something that you want to be careful for. So if that's the case, that's just a lesson of, well, don't oversell, right? So if you got 9 out of 10 saying it's all good, and that one had a problem because of expectation gaps, that's a sales issue. And then sales, we can totally customize this and add this function. Not the number of times I've heard this, and then after that they just say no, right? Usually in the background, you're going to have an engineer who's sweating profusely, going like, "Please, no, shut up! Oh my God, no! Why are you doing this?" So I mean, if you know Dilbert comic strips, you know what I'm talking about, right? The Dilbert going like, "No, please, no." So this is a very common thing, right? This is a red flag for me. This is a reverse flag. This is a red flag in the opposite direction, right? But maybe you, as a director or as an owner or as a shareholder, you'll be listening there to your sales superstar just selling the world, and you'll be like, hold up, this kind of dev is going to take me 3 months. I'm going to have to dev this for 3 months. I can't. I have to worry on delivering this ESG metrics. How am I going to do this? Oh my God, I can't code this logic. So burn rate, hiring more people, no, we can't do that. We should be doing this anyways. It's so far from the core product. So that's for, from a startup perspective. For me personally, it's just, oh yeah, we can add this function. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna. Look, man, if you have an API I can pipe into, yeah, we do. Okay, great, fantastic. I'll just get it from there, But this is a red flag for me usually, if as a customer more, that okay, well, really. I'm gonna take a 2-minute, just a breather here, because I've been going on like 100 miles an hour. Is there any questions so far, or any comments or concerns? If you want to boo me, please do it after I leave. But anything, guys.
Any question, please? Anyone, just raise your hand or write the question in the chat, please. So, say so far so good.
Okay.
No
Cool.
questions. No
I like
one.
that Kais is enjoying it.
No one would like to ask a question. It's not every day that you have the CISO of DTC with you, so.
I'm not
But
the CISO of DTC. I'm the IoT specialist. But I've been around.
Sorry.
I've been around CISOs. I'm in a CISO group right now, and
Okay.
yeah, I spent enough time with them to kind of get an idea of, okay. All right.
All right.
Cool.
So you can continue after your minute if you want a break.
Sure. All right. I want to give you some observations I've had of customers, right? And if you've been on the customer side, then this should be very obvious to you, right? But I was very surprised because I've sat with some people, you're doing my usual thing, we sit down, we have a shisha, we have some arayis or shish tawuk or whatever, right? And I shared some feedback on, how it is in a company, and they just say, oh my God, I didn't know that. And then it hit me, some of these people have never been on the customer side before. So I thought I'd share some things with you. Some are listed, some are not. First one is the killer, right? Many are non-technical, and that's not a bad thing per se. As a C-level, your job is not to be necessarily technical. And I know CTOs will say, no, well, hold on. Your primary function is not to be technical. As a chief anything, your primary function is to be business-oriented, right? As a chief HR officer, your primary function isn't to hire people. It's to ensure that the human resources or human capital that you've hired doesn't put the company at risk. And you reduce scandals, you reduce libel, you reduce liabilities, you ensure maximum throughput, et cetera, right? Same with a CTO. As a CTO, you're responsible for making sure that the dev teams deliver the code as necessary. Again, this is from an enterprise context, not a startup context. A CTO in an enterprise is very different, right? Versus a CTO in a startup. The CTO in the startup is literally coding up everything, right? So your customers in the UAE especially, a lot of them are going to be quote unquote enterprise, and you can debate the meaning of enterprise accordingly, right? Enterprise in the States doesn't necessarily mean enterprise in the UAE. From a number perspective, in terms of people, in terms of revenue, but that's irrelevant. They structure themselves in a way like enterprises do, typically. That's the point, which means they come from that angle. So you will find CIOs, CISOs, CTOs who are not necessarily technical. And that's not to say that they have zero technical capability. They could be non-technical in their roles. They're purposely staying non-technical. They can I mean, I had one of my bosses walk me through setting up an HPE blade chassis and setting up an HCI cluster in it just by using storage blades in conjunction with compute blades, and how the backplane connects everything together using a fabric like Mellanox, which I can then connect, and then there's my virtual server, and then I can do the clustering of the storage on the back end with the storage abstraction layer. So I can do an HCI. Okay, this is a group CIO. So they can be technical, right? But that's not their primary job. Their primary job is how can we make money? How can we make digital products or digital optimizations or automations or RPAs that give us more money, that give us more availability? That's the primary function, right? Some of them will truly be, like, you don't know how to install your own copy of Windows? Come on, man. You will meet those people. But again, as long as they delegate to the right people, that's what being a leader is all about. Many are underpowered. And my favorite observation that I like to quote is, if you see a good chief or a good MD or director, right, whoever's the top of the food chain of technology, and they're struggling to deliver, I've noticed many a times it's just a matter of they have bad middle managers. Because if they don't get the work done from their teams, then that's where things suffer. I'm not saying bad engineers don't exist, but I've seen too many times where you had an engineer, you wasted your engineer, right? You didn't stagger your shifts out. You didn't implement change management policies correctly. Your chief wants it, you're not doing it. Why are you not following ITSM principles, right? So this is just basic things, right? So many times the resistance for a CISO or CIO or CTO could very much be from the guy just reporting to him, misreporting, etc. BS politics. This is unfortunate, right? In other cases, it can be a manpower issue. It can be a manpower quality issue. It can be the operations team being so far across the aisle that they just pretend they don't understand what you're talking about. I've had people literally look me dead in the face, tell me that they cannot implement security controls for Active Directory, and I said, "Are you serious? Are you saying that you cannot disable NTLM v1 responses? Oh, you want me to disable NTLM v1? Yeah, I can do that. Well, did you read the documentation I sent you? Yes, it was very security focused. It's literally on page 30, man. It's literally one of the things in the CIS benchmarks that you have to implement. How can you not read? Basic reading comprehension is lost on these people. So I've met such people and I've dealt with such people. They exist, right? So it's not necessarily that they're directly underpowered. Sometimes it's just from the other side. Other times I've seen procurement being a pain. Other times I've seen finance being a pain, not giving budgets or freezing budgets, or an audit is going on. It came out of nowhere and I have to pay attention on this audit. There's nothing much I can do. I had some spare capacity. I had one engineer free to do this, and now this guy is stuck in the audit. I can't do it. So you will face these common issues, and just be ready for that. Many are misinformed, and they will believe that what they know is fact. There is no two ways about it. Like zero trust networks. Zero trust networks is not a VPN. Are bhai. I mean, the number of times I've just had to go to people and say, guys, a VPN, an overlay is literally what a VPN is, right? No, it's an overlay. It's not a VPN. Okay, khalas, it's an overlay. Fine. What does it do? It connects your machines to your enterprise data center? Yes. Great. You have next generation VPN. Call it what you want. Yeah. I mean, it's literally the same thing. But there's that thing. And part of it is stubbornness. Part of that is ego. Again, these are nice people. They have good hearts, many of them, really. But and I'm probably one of those people, right? This conceit of, I know this. I know what I'm talking about. This is something you're going to have to battle. And I've been that guy. I've been that guy as a customer to a sales guy who, I think one company was able to actually say, no, Bilal, you're wrong because of this. And I was like, oh, wow. So my lesson as a customer was to add a new thing afterwards. And this has worked for me very well everywhere, right? If I'm security talking to ops, this is what I'll do. If I'm security, if I'm talking to a supplier, this is what I'll say. And I'll say, guys, I could be wrong, but my understanding is, and then proceed to just as pompously say what I was going to say. And I'll follow up with that again. Guys, if I'm wrong, please tell me how we can improve this. And interestingly, people actually accept me more. So just, so yeah, but there's going to be a lot of that, right? And again, this comes back to the earlier statement of that obfuscation and that marketing, that strong over marketing, right? There's a lot of that. There's too much of that. And that's what you're going to have to fight with. As a startup with a way smaller marketing budget, you're going to have to fight with that. It's not going to be easy. You can use it to your advantage, but then you also have to make sure that people aren't lost in that conversation. Procurement will make you get very comfortable with your therapist. And if you don't have one, you will definitely find one. So much so that your wife or husband will say, are you cheating on me? No, I really need this therapy. And you're not the one that's going to give it to me because you're part of the problem. But yeah, you will have a tough time. Procurement will make you insane. Then half of my calls are cold calls. The other half of my calls are procurement related calls. Sarji, LPO ka kya hua? I'm like, man, the LPO, am I finance? First off, that's a finance department thing, right? Well, yeah, but the procurement department has to sign it off. Yes, they have to, and they still haven't. And that's a them issue. I can't help you. I'll go talk to them, definitely, but it's not in my direct control, right? So yeah, I mean, 4 out of 10, it's procurement. 4 out of 10, it's sales. 1 to 2 out of 10, it's actually working on the thing, right? Actually, sometimes it's not even 1 out of 10, it's less. And then poorly cobbled together customer teams. Yeah, I've literally heard of people getting migraines which are undiagnosable because of this. I've heard of people having back pains that are undiagnosable because of this, right? Just, man, these customers, they don't know. This guy in his team, he doesn't know, and the CIO doesn't correct him, or the CIO doesn't tell him to shut up, or the CISO is a good guy. He knows what we want, but he's not in these calls because he's busy with the CEO, and his manager is just totally useless. His manager is just doing everything wrong and then blaming us. And then when the CISO gets on a call once a month, he asks us, we explain it to him. He says, why didn't you escalate it? Well, we did. Your dumbass manager didn't take it to you. Sorry. But literally, this is how frustrating it can be for people, right? So this is going to be one of your biggest nightmares. If it's not procurement, it's going to be this. And if it's both, then I'm very sorry for you. But this is literally what you're going to have to face.
Hi,
So,
Bilal. Sorry to
yeah, bro.
interrupt you. Thank you so much. We are nearly there at the end of the 1 hour. I don't know if you have still a lot of slides
No.
to present.
I'm done. This
Okay.
is actually it, right? Just, I appreciate for the reminder. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
sorry, because we have 1 hour for the session, but it was really interesting. Thank you so much, Bilal. I will just maybe open the floor for some questions because I think that would be also very beneficial for everyone. So, do you have any question or anyone, any question for Bilal? Don't hesitate, please.
I really recommend you guys watch this show if you haven't already. Seriously.
So as there is no question, direct question, Bilal, maybe you can add more minutes to discuss about this last slide that we can all see here on the screen.
If you've watched Silicon Valley, then you'll already know why I've put it here. But if you haven't watched it, it's a very good exercise of understanding startup culture. Obviously, this is specific to Silicon Valley in America, but I've seen startups in Pakistan. I've worked at an incubator as the IT guy, and it's not too far off. I've also seen startup pitches in a university where I used to work, and you'll see some of the most insane pitches ever, right? And I think Silicon Valley does a good job of kind of going into various different things. In fact, I learned about some things from Silicon Valley regarding uh, this stuff, right? So, for example, Scrum. I learned about Scrum more from Silicon Valley than I did in an actual Scrum session. I'm like, well, what the hell are we doing this for? Oh, okay, that's why they do Scrum. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm not saying that you need to do it or you must do it. Waterfall. I'm a waterfall guy. It's fine, but it's a really good show. It's entertaining. It's funny. Um, and I think there'll be some people that'll just empathize too much on certain points. So, I say it's mandatory homework, but guys, watch it if you want. Really, I do recommend it strongly. But yeah, that's really about it. Since no one has asked me to delve into the finance parts or anything, I guess that's not necessary. But guys, if you have any questions, please.
This is your last chance.
I'm not
You have a
dying,
question?
you know. I mean, yeah, no.
So there is a one question, and thank you. It's from Welma Williams. So, what is the bottom line basics for tech leaders to communicate better with business leaders? That's a very interesting one.
That is the it is such an essential question, and it's the essential parts which always are the hardest to answer, right? Um, see, tech leaders aren't supposed to be tech leaders, right? If you, let's take a CISO or a CIO as an example. As I mentioned earlier, you're not supposed to be a technical role. You're supposed to be a business leader role. And that's the hardest thing to kind of take away from that, right? Especially if you're an organically grown CISO or CIO or CTO, right? You started off as an L1 or a junior dev, you worked your way up, now you're at that level. Well, you got to understand that you got to be able to communicate with business in business terms, right? And if you can't do that, then that's already a huge disadvantage to you, because that means you're literally just like an in-house IT service provider or an in-house dev team that people come to you, they come to your corner and they say, can you develop this for me? And then, you know, God bless your project manager trying to figure out what's being discussed. So as a leader, you need to be business oriented. You need to speak business language. You need to know words like OPEX and CAPEX. You need to know words like risk, and not just from a cyber perspective only, but risk from, for example, well, what's your brand risk like, right? Is that something that you can afford from an optics perspective? Optics is a very useful term here, right? If you can have those discussions, then it's in a more meaningful place. But the vocabulary is easy. I know the vocabulary. My challenge that I'll use for my own self is I don't see what they see, right? When I'm in Dubai Taxi, right? So if I see, for example, Kareem or Uber, I don't see the same business angles that, for example, the CEO would or the COO would, right? They would see certain things from a certain way because they have been in that domain. They are in that domain for, you know, they're daily driving that domain. They know about the intricacies that I don't. And that's my gap, right? So that there's an industry specific gap. But aside from that, right, we're a publicly traded company. Well, okay, I know a couple of things, compliance, etc. perspective, but what about things from a stock perspective, right? Well, if I had that knowledge, that would also be something that I can kind of discuss, which unfortunately I don't have that knowledge. I know it's more stringent. I know compliance is not to be joked about. You can't just underestimate compliance. So I have been doing that. But that's going to be the tough part, right? Especially from cyber, right? Which is that, okay, well, we just launched a new subsidiary company. We cannot merge information systems because that company is not us. It is strictly a separate entity. It has a separate trade license, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, the more you have it, the more valuable your feedback will be.
Thank you very much, Bilal, and thank you for being with us today. It was a great pleasure, and once again, thank you for everyone who attended this session. And I think everybody learned a lot. Maybe for some it was more technical than others, but a very interesting one. Thank you again, Bilal, and hope to meet you in person, inshallah. Thank you, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, guys. And I am on LinkedIn, so just give me a connect and give me a chat, and we can definitely catch up if anything, if you have any questions or whatever.